Hello, welcome to this segment of Those Who Serve. Joining me today, I have a very special guest who was born September 30th, 1924. February 17th of 1943, at the age of 18, he volunteered with the Army Air Corps and was deployed to Camp Wheeler in Macon, Georgia. By September 1944, he had earned the rank of first lieutenant and ferried a new B-17 to Prestwick, England, where he served with the 401st Bomb Group of the 8th Air Force as a bombardier and a navigator on the B-17G Flying Fortress. He flew 35 high-altitude combat missions. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Alan Crawford. Mr. Crawford. Mr. Crawford, thank you for being with us today.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you. And a privilege.
Well, just the beginning of your bio is extensive. What made you decide to volunteer and join the Army Air Corps at the age of 18?
Well, I'd always felt very personal about it, our country. I entered into sports in high school, and it had been very good, and I just thought it was something that I would like to do. I guess you might call it peer pressure at that time.
Were a lot of your friends joining at that time as well?
Well, some were joining, some were being drafted, and when I graduated from high school in January, I realized it was only going to be a very short period of time before I would be drafted. So I decided to go ahead and volunteer and get going with it.
So you were excited to do this. You wanted to do this and join. You flew 35 high altitude. Those are long distance, long houred combat missions.
Yes.
There any of those missions, you took over the plane, you were in control of the bombing. Are there any of those missions you remember more than others? Anything that stuck out to you?
Well, I have one, two, or three in mind that I might explain, but before doing that, I would like to indicate for each mission, you voluntarily went out to that airplane. In this case, the airplane, it could be a tank or whatever, but in this case, we got to the airplane and we waited. At the time that the start engine flare went off, that's when your danger for the whole day started. In this case, the elements of danger are three, basically: weather, fighter pilots, and flak, or the anti-aircraft guns and bullets and shells that were shot up at you. So from the moment you got to the runway and started your taxi, you had those three elements out there. Every one of those 35 missions. So that kind of impressed you. In the context of the very first mission, which was in October of 44, we were scheduled to bomb Hamburg. And that was a pretty big target, but everything being brand new and everything was exciting all around. We went to briefing and a lot of noise, a lot of people in there talking, waiting for the commanding officer to make his appearance. When that was done, everything hushed, and the weather person, the weather officer, drew the drapes open, and here on the wall was a red ribbon trailing from England to where you were going in Germany, or your target area. In this case, it happened to be Hamburg, and we got out to the airplane, and before that mission starts, we have the general briefing, which is for the gunners, pilots, and then bombardiers, everybody. Then we split into individual briefing. The pilots, bombardier with the group bombardier, and the navigators. And then we all got into our truck, went to the plane. And at that time, we were ready to take off. Well, we took off and flew over to Hamburg. And as bombardier, I always told them when to put the oxygen mask on at 10,000. And then, depending on circumstances, fighter attacked or whatever, the frequency would increase. I would call for an oxygen check. And the tail gunner, tail okay, waist okay, right up through the pilots to me. If we weren't involved, I'd make it a little longer between those checks. Anyway, to the left, I looked over and I saw a great big black cloud over there, barrage like. And as being the new combat crew, I called their attention to the fact that, boy, look at the flak over there on the left over Hamburg. Aren't you guys glad we're not going there? And boy, did I have to eat those words, because we got to the initial point within moments and made a turn and headed right towards that black cloud. I learned to keep my mouth shut and quit describing things of that nature. But it was a very inaugurating, exhibiting mission in that we got everything, fighters and flak and so on, and we went through, and then you learned a great deal right away.
The realization of that had to be startling, but at the same time, eye-opening, that survival was dependent upon the crew working together.
Absolutely. When you take off on the mission, you have 3 squadrons. Each squadron technically is supposed to have 12 planes. And you went out there with 36 ships. If you didn't work with your crew, and I've always maintained throughout all my adult life, if you're in charge, that crew is going to reflect your beliefs, your requirements, your discipline, and so forth. And that's going to help. And this was exhibited throughout the 35 missions by our commanding officers. We had 2, both colonels. One was advanced to brigadier and went to 8th Air Force headquarters. But over the mission, over the target, they would say, all right, close it in. Close it in. You'd hear the pilots grumble, you can't get it any closer without walking from wingtip to wingtip. Mm-hmm. It was so close. Well, that came out because we got better bombing statistics. We had less airplane loss, casualties, because our cone of firepower was maintained. The 36 ships that kept the cone and the firepower, and everything was better. And when we ended the war, 401st had a very enviable record on lesser casualties, better what they called the CE center air, and so forth.
You had a great record of success.
Yes.
But with a strong team.
It's strong.
Working together.
Strong team and strong leadership.
The war was a fascinating time of your life, a time of learning, a time of development, a time when you realized your potential and capabilities. But then after the war, you continued your education. You went back to school. You earned a BS in Business Administration and Personal Management with a minor in Economics and Psychology. And then, after earning that degree, right after World War II, you returned to school again in 1991 At the age of 67, you completed a master's degree in criminal justice administration. Why?
Well, the world was evolving, was getting more knowledgeable. The world itself was becoming more educated, and I felt I needed that master to support or add to what I'd already accomplished in the sense of education. And the education was an extremely important and valuable thing. It supplied me with the means to provide for my family and provide education for them. And I originally sold Crawford Research several years later to the Wackenhut Corporation out of Miami, Florida, Coral Gables, Florida. And I did that because I was getting tired. I was working night and day. And I said, I've got to get some money into the till, so we'll be here to provide the education for my 3 sons.
Before this degree, in July 1951, you joined the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI,
Yes.
and you were a special agent with them till 1957. J. Edgar Hoover reign. I understand you were an agent under his rule. Tell us some stories about being in the FBI.
Well, that's what we've been talking about here. When I went in the FBI, and the minute I stepped into that room and raised my hand, I knew there was no room for foolishness here. You felt it. And that was a direct reflection of Hoover down through the ranks as far as I was concerned. And all the time I was in the FBI, we never had a problem with agent personnel or any background problem that surfaced and made them do something. So after Mr. Hoover died, we started encountering problems like that because his force and personality and discipline was not there. But I could, at least I personally sensed that when I went into that room. And the reason I volunteered for that was I was still Air Force Reserve, and the Korean War had started, and people interviewing at the college level did not want to take the risk of my being hired and then recalled. And I had one person asked me if I wasn't being a little over loyalty, a little bit extreme that way. I said, don't you feel that you did your business, you did what was required of you for this country? And I said, well, I did what I had to do, and I did what I felt I should do, and that's something that still stays. And they asked, would you do it again? I said, absolutely.
Absolutely. Over and above the call of duty, but following your heart.
Yeah, that's the call of duty, what you feel there. What is providing this for you? I mean, where'd all this good stuff come from? It had to come from somebody in front of us. It was a sort of a pass down. Here it is, it's free. Sort of like today, all this stuff is out there. That came from greatest generation as far as I'm concerned.
I agree totally.
Yeah.
The greatest generation. And you did provide that freedom.
Yes, yeah. And I think I said it earlier, but in that situation, you knew where you were going, which some of our wars here lately, they don't know where they're going. We did. We were there to win, not to lose, and we fought to win. And that's what we won.
You did. You won.
Right.
For God and country. So you had 2 careers already. You had a military career. You had a career with FBI. But that wasn't enough. Then you went on to establish Crawford Research Incorporated, a security consulting firm, which later you sold. But during your time with that entity, you worked for Playboy Enterprises, Hugh Hefner, Wells Fargo Guard Services. You were the vice president of investigations.
Yeah.
You helped to stop some food stamp fraud. The U.S. Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. You headed a special task force to investigate Medicare fraud and abuse in the home health industry. And you also worked for the Department of Education. You helped them. You've done a little bit of everything. You're impressive. What stands out to you those years and all the different entities in which you have served?
Well, my time with Playboy Enterprises and Hugh Hefner was probably the most challenging and difficult security type job that I had, with all the office buildings across the country, the Playboy clubs, personnel, the aircraft. I had the same kind of security for the aircraft, and when Hefner was on board and that type. So I just felt that very strongly, and that was probably the most difficult situation. And Wells Fargo, I went there as vice president of investigations. They had heard about some of my success earlier. Then I went down to Florida, and I reestablished Ellen Crawford and Associates, Inc. And that's where all the other whatevers came in, and so on.
Well, you definitely established a great reputation and a good name for yourself and for your company.
Yes.
Now, you're 91 now. 91. You actually said you retired in 2000 to 2001.
Yes.
You and your lovely wife, Amelia, who I've had the honor of meeting, 7 children, 14 grandchildren. But you're really not retired, are you?
Well, business-wise and work-wise, no, we need to redefine that word retirement or retired, because I and many people I've since become associated with have the same feeling. Your workload increases. You know, you add to it. Yeah, I'll do that, or yes, I like that. And you've done this in the past. Well, I've worked at, that kind of thing comes up, and you start accepting, and all of a sudden you are not retired.
Because you still volunteer and you help in different events, especially veteran events, and you also are still active with the 401st Bomb Group. You are serving on the board of directors until 2016.
Yes.
So you're obligated for the next couple of years to continue in that effort as well.
Yes.
What would you say to young people today with the activity level that they have or don't have? What would you say to them to inspire them to accomplish and to receive the rewards that you have not only received, but you've given to society?
That's a biggie. If I'd mentioned a little while ago about we'd have to change the world some or change our country, because over the past few years we've been doing nothing but coasting. You go back to the greatest generation. It came from the results of the war and World War II. The current people are not doing that. We need to reinstitute the draft, and we need to have volunteers out there, people that were coming in, some were paying, and it is not a good situation. It does not teach discipline. It does not teach moving ahead, nor does it teach, hey, I'm doing this to win, not to lose. That's why I'm over here fighting in Iraq, Afghanistan, Korea, wherever. That's why I'm here, to win. And I think we need something of this type, a new draft, a volunteer system that will start to turn this country around. We've loathed long enough.
Very good. Sir, to what do you attribute your abilities? At 91, you are still actively engaged. What do you attribute?
At 90.
90.
90,
Okay.
yeah.
At 90, you're still...
Don't get me there too quick.
I'm sorry, I try not to rush my age either.
Yeah, okay, that's all right.
What do you attribute your abilities to continue forward?
Well, I personally like to see things of value, and why spend your time on something that is not of any value to our nation or to our community or family, however you want to reduce it. And to do that, you've got to be thinking about doing something of value. And then you start making decisions as to what's the most valuable, or what do we need the most. Well, and I just said it, we need to quit coasting. We need to get to work, change this country around to what it was before, when Tom Brokaw labeled it the greatest generation, and it was the greatest. And and when I say we, I'm not only talking of the Air Force, but the Marines, the Army. I'm thinking of the Coast Guard, Merchant Marines, and also the ladies that came out of the house to work in the factories and clear our guy. It was a total commitment to this situation, and it showed. And that's what we got to find again.
Total commitment to our country.
Yes.
I like that, sir. I like that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's what's got to do it.
Thank you, sir.
Boy.
Thank you for joining me here today, sir. And thanks to you at home for joining us on this segment of Those Who Served. I'm Council Lady Paula Stinnett. God bless, and stay tuned for more informational and educational programming today.